in Los Angeles. How are you, my dear friends? Who will arrive first? Who will comment where they're tuning in from? Who will signal to Facebook and YouTube that we are doing something of value here so that more people will be shown this in their feeds? Leona Sue Thacker comments first, and Edith in New York City comments first on YouTube. Wonderful. Wow, it was an exciting trip for APAC. Very effective, very inspiring. If you're a person who loves Israel, got to speak up at this time. Thank God we have a beautiful friendship between the United States and Israel. And of course, it's really God who protects both our countries, but we have to do our part, and letting our elected officials know that the friendship between America and Israel is a valuable friendship for both countries is important. How are you, my dear friends? We are on page 62 of Berachos. I misspoke yesterday. I said there were 63 pages in the tractate. In fact, there are 64. Page 64 is somewhat short, and with God's help, we'll get to that Friday about midday, today being Wednesday. But today we're doing 62. And this is a colorful page. Berachos 62 is a very colorful page, a memorable page. Some might even say a humorous page, and we'll have a little humorous story coming later in AT Daily today. But let's just jump right in. We have a teaching here at the top that Rabbi Akiva entered the bathroom after Rabbi Yehoshua and learned 3 things from him. Now, I've been saying since the outset of this show that what the Talmud is all about, what our sages are all about, is learning God's will literally in every nook and cranny of our lives, right? There's a right way and a wrong way to do things. We're trying to make our entire lives, right, an expression of the good that humans can do in this world when we live according to God's will. So our sages will study every part of the human enterprise to see what's the right way to do things. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about the bathroom and what is the right way to go to the bathroom. Why? Because even this is a place for Torah. And not only the bathroom, but the bedroom. So we'll be getting to that momentarily. So in this story, Rabbi Akiva follows his teacher, Rabbi Yehoshua, into the bathroom, and he reports to his students that he learned 3 things from Rabbi Yehoshua. Number 1, that one must not defecate while facing east or west. Now, this of course only applies when you are living in a place that is east or west of the Temple Mount, right? In such a case, you would want to, sit down to relieve yourself in such a way that you're facing north or south, so that you wouldn't be, exposing yourself and relieving yourself as, facing either with your behind or your front side toward the temple. This is all about having utter respect for the temple, even at a time when the temple had already been destroyed. And we still have that kind of respect for where the temple once stood, because while it stood, that was the resting place on earth of the presence of God, right? So if you're in such a place, and so all the more, in the morning when we pray, or in the afternoon, or in the evening when we pray, here in America, we face east, because that's the direction of the Holy Land, and within it, the Temple Mount. So if possible, when we're relieving ourselves, we wouldn't want to be facing east or west. We'd rather be facing north or south. Now, you need to understand that the bathroom back then is not what the bathroom is now. You don't have to worry if you have the choice, because you're building a house from scratch. So it would be nice if you could make the bathroom face north and south rather than east-west. But really this applies when you're relieving yourself outdoors, because then there's no wall of privacy between you and the bathroom. If you find yourself north or south of the Temple Mount, right? You're in the north of Israel, or you're in the south of Israel, or further south, you're in Africa, as it were. Or you're north, going straight north from Israel. What do you encounter? I mean, Syria, and then I guess eventually Russia, right? So then you wouldn't want to be facing north and south. You prefer to be facing east and west. And what we're learning from Rabbi Akiva is the punctilious thoughtfulness, right? That when you go to the bathroom, just have a thought to be respectful, even in your most private, guarded moment when you're really all about yourself, right? I gotta go. You're not thinking about anybody else or how I'm facing or what I gotta do. I gotta go, I'm gonna go, right? You run into the bathroom and do your thing. But if you find yourself outside, and we're going to learn on this page that if you are outside, or in the kind of like old-fashioned bathroom, which was like, like a trench basically, with maybe some kind of partition around it, then you have to be modest while you're in the bathroom. We'll get to that momentarily. But there was two other things that Rabbi Akiva learned from Rabbi Yehoshua. Now we're talking about modesty, right? First, face, not in the direction of the temple, neither with your front nor with your back. Second, uncover yourself while you're sitting, okay? Now this goes to, it's a more general category, the idea that you need to be modest with yourself, with your body, right? And not expose yourself unnecessarily in any fashion whatsoever. He's teaching that even when you're in the bathroom and you're alone, I mean, certainly if there's other people in the bathroom, it's one of these old style, it's just like a trench and there's other people around going to the bathroom. So then you got to be really careful not to expose anything unnecessarily, right? So even in such a condition, you would sit and then kind of pull up your garment. I mean, they didn't wear pants and shirts the way we do. But the point is that even in the bathroom, if it's like a public bathroom, like men at a stadium, right? And there's all the guys going. There are stadiums like this where the guys will just all go in a kind of long communal urinal. And then in such a place, there wouldn't be dividers and you would be exposed to the people around you. So you try to maintain your privacy any way you can and not expose yourself to others. And even when you're alone, you would try to not expose anything unnecessarily. And once you understand that that is the ideal behavior, then all the more, you wouldn't be a streaker. You don't get naked outside. I mean, our sages are teaching us that you really have to be modest with your behavior. I'm not going to say anything more about that. And the third thing that Rabbi Akiva learned from his teacher, Rabbi Yehoshua, is that you don't wipe with your right hand, right? Back then, they didn't have toilet paper. It was much more organic when they went number two, and they had to clean themselves. They would even, sometimes use like a stone to wipe off the debris. And so, the stuff could get on your hand. So you would make sure that if such a thing was going to happen, it would be on your left hand and not your right hand. Now, Akiva said that he learned these three things from Rabbi Yehoshua. Ben Azai objected and said, "You are impertinent, Akiva." So presumably Akiva was reporting to Ben Azai what he learned from Rabbi Yehoshua. And Ben Azai said, "You were impertinent. How could you go into the bathroom and look at your teacher while he was doing these things?" And Akiva's answer was, "It is Torah, and I must learn." And Ben Azai learned not only those three things that Akiva taught him, but the idea that you want to learn by somebody's example, by their behavior, even more than their words. And so the next Gemara that we learn is almost exactly the same story, except that Ben Azai reports that he learned three things from Akiva. And they're the same three things, right? That when you go to the bathroom, number two, you shouldn't be facing, east-west if you're in an east-west direction from the temple, that you should uncover yourself only while sitting, and that you should that you should not wipe with your right hand. You should only wipe with your left hand. And then Rabbi Yehuda said to Ben Azai, you were impertinent. You followed Akiva into the bathroom to learn those things. And Ben Azai gave the same answer that Akiva had given. It is Torah, and I must learn. Now, there's some underlying lessons here, right? Primarily this idea that, number one, in every realm of our life, right, we want to conduct ourselves in an upright manner. And number two, that we would like to learn from people who model the behavior that they're teaching. And modeling the behavior is even more of a lesson than what they say, right? And as parents, we all know that. I mean, if we say one thing to our kids and behave another, the kids are going to learn from how we behave more than what we say. The English saying would be practice what you preach, because otherwise your preaching is nothing, right? It's narishkeit. And then this leads us to a very famous story in the Talmud about learning, right, a lesson from one's teacher through their behavior rather than their words. And the famous story is about Rav Kahana, who learned this story from Rav, who learned the behavior from Rav. So Rav Kahana is a very important sage. He was a first generation Amora, so that next generation after the Mishnah had been set down, after the Tanaim. But he was the first generation of the Amoraim in Babylonia, in Bavel, and he was considered so learned and so wise that his rulings practically have the same authority as a Tana, that earlier generation, right? The further back we go, the more authoritative the rulings are considered to be, because those people were closer to when Torah was given at Sinai. Rav Kahana eventually had to leave where he was in Babylonia because he had a problem with the Persian authorities. Babylonia at that time was under the power of Persia. And so he went to Eretz Yisrael and he learned with the sages that were teaching in Israel under the Roman occupation. And he was considered just such a great and respected sage by his contemporaries, Resh Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Now, we have a story that Rav Kahana went into Rav's bedroom and hid under Rav's bed. Rav came in with his wife, not knowing somebody was under the bed. And we learn that how did Rav conduct himself in the privacy of his bedroom with his wife? He spoke sweet things to her. He laughed with her. They had a good time together. And then they saw to their needs, right? They did what married couples do. And then Kahana speaks up from under the bed, and he says, my teacher, let me get the exact quote here, it's so good. He says, so he heard Rav chatting and laughing with his wife and seeing to his needs, and Rav Kahana said, the mouth of Abba, meaning Rav, his teacher, is like one who has never eaten a cooked dish. Like you can imagine a person who's only eaten raw food all his life and is suddenly presented with cooked food. He's like, oh, this is amazing, right? And he's just, in other words, he acted very lustfully and with great vigor and eagerness and pleasure in enjoying himself with his wife. And Kahana said, commented like, that's not right, right? Because my master should be just always, very quiet and dignified and, not talk about what he's doing and not talk during sex and, not act like somebody who's so taken away, carried away with what's going on. And Rav's answer to his student is, Kahana, you are here? Leave! This is an undesirable mode of behavior. And Kahana's answer to Rav is, it is Torah, and I must learn, right? Now, this is not commendable behavior on Rav Kahana's part. The lesson is here to show to the extreme that one sage, and a very wise sage, went, but erred, made a mistake in going this far, in order to learn from his teacher, not by what he said, by what he did. This too is Torah, and I must learn, right? So this idea of going out of our way to be around great teachers, really wise people, and not just read their books, and not just attend their lectures, but to try to be around them as much as we can and to learn from their example. This is Torah, and this is a good way to learn. Hiding under their bed is too much. Okay, that's ridiculous. We don't do that. Rav Kahana should not have done that. Robin Raymond Hunter says, I'm cracking up. As well we should. It is pretty ridiculous. But the editors of the Talmud include that story, right? It's here for a reason. It's to tell it, first of all, it's to wake us up. We're near the end of the volume. Like, oh man, lest we were kind of in a daze and just learning one lesson after another. Here we're going to wake up. We're going to pay attention. But we learn a few things from this. First of all, we do learn that Rav was very sweet with his wife and didn't conduct himself, as a stern and august and prominent Torah scholar and overly dignified. In the privacy of his home with his wife, they conducted themselves, with pleasure and had fun together and were sweet to each other, and that's good for the relationship. But of course, we learn that we learn by example. This was just taking it a little bit too far. Okay. Going back to these lessons that we learned from Akiva and Ben Azai, we understand why we don't face east-west when we're going to the bathroom, especially if we're outside and we would be facing that direction. For example, people are on a hike or they're on a golf course and they have to, even go number one, and they face a tree and they do their thing. But if possible, understand which way is east-west and get into a north-south direction. Shows that you're being mindful. On the question of why we don't use our right hand to wipe after we go number two, a few reasons are given. Rava says because the Torah was given with the right hand. Right, and it's like sort of metaphorically speaking, and there's a line in Deuteronomy. Let me get the line. Where is it? Sorry. Just want to get it correct. From Deuteronomy chapter 33. It says, at his, meaning God's, right hand was a fiery law unto them, right? So the law, the Torah, was given with the right hand, at least metaphorically speaking. And if we have a little bit of understanding of Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, the right hand represents loving kindness and giving, right? With the right hand, God gives. And with the left hand, God judges and restrains the amount that he gives and even takes away. The right hand gives, the left takes away, or at least restrains the amount that is given. And so Torah was given with the right hand. The right hand, therefore, is always understood to be a little bit superior, a little bit more holy than the left hand for a right-handed person. And so we, wipe with the left hand and keep the right hand available for giving, as symbolized by God giving Torah with his right hand. Rabbi Bar Chana gives a different reason. We wipe with the left hand because we eat with the right hand. Now this is a very universal custom everywhere in the world where people eat with their hands, and this is something you still see today. If you have a Bedouin feast, if you eat in certain parts of Africa. Here in LA, there's a whole block on Fairfax of Ethiopian restaurants, and it's really fun. You can go to, if there was a kosher Ethiopian restaurant, you could go, and some people will eat in a vegan restaurant, and there is vegan Ethiopian, where you eat with the right hand, like you sort of use the Ethiopian bread and dip it into the vegetable mix and pick up some of that food and eat it. It's really delicious. And you would only do that with the right hand because people use the left hand for their needs. Resh Lakish says, the reason you would not wipe with the right hand is because the right hand puts the tefillin on the left hand, right? So the tefillin that we put on in the morning, it goes on the left arm. Therefore, the right hand is touching the box that contains the Holy Scrolls in it. When we put the tefillin on our left arm, we want to keep the right hand, more pure, right? More clean. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says we don't use the right hand because we use it to point to the Torah when we're laning, right? When we're reading the Torah out loud in the synagogue, and we're pointing as we sing out the words of the Torah, we use our right hand for that, so we don't use our right hand in the bathroom. And the Gemara takes this idea even further to tell you how important it is, and it says that these four opinions are parallel to a dispute of the Tanaim, right? So these were Amoras, that later generation, and their arguments parallel what the Tanaim said in an earlier generation. Rabbi Eliezer said, you don't use your right hand because you eat with it. Rabbi Yehoshua said, we don't use the right hand in the bathroom because we write with the right hand. And Rabbi Kiva said, we don't use the right hand in the bathroom because we use it to point to the Torah as we read it aloud. Then we come to another story later in today's page, and an important person died. An important person died, and there was a eulogizer. Now, I'm a little unclear about this. It seems to me that the eulogizer was like a professional brought in for this purpose, as opposed to a family member who's giving a eulogy, for the beloved departed. So let's just say that they would, maybe it was a local rabbi, right? But they brought in somebody who was talented at giving a eulogy at a funeral, so that this person could speak the praises of the one who is gone. And the eulogizer at the funeral and in the presence of Rav Nachman said many nice things about the person who died. Among them, called this person a modest man. He was a modest man. After the funeral was over, Rav Nachman pulled the eulogizer aside and said to him, "And did you follow this prominent individual into the bathroom to know that he was a modest person?" Now, this story is to tell us a couple of things. Number one, that a person is not called modest, cannot be called modest with truth, right? Cannot truthfully be called modest unless he is modest in all his ways, right? Some people will put on a show of modesty when others are looking, and so that he can be called modest in certain situations, but is not consistently modest, right? If you're to be consistently modest, it means you're modest in all your ways, even away from the eyes of the public when you're in the bathroom. Rav Nachman is establishing a very high standard. Can anybody be that modest? What he's saying is, well, you can try. You can try to be modest in all your ways. Be mindful of modesty in all your ways. Secondly, we learn that at a funeral, we want to say good things. We want to remember the departed in the most positive way possible. But the law is we don't make up stuff. You don't make up stuff to say at a funeral. It has to be related to the person's actual good qualities. And if, unfortunately now and then there are people who have no good qualities, and if you have nothing nice to say nothing, right? Find something nice to say. If you cannot say anything kind about the dead, then don't say anything. Say that this person has passed. And this reminds us of a story, of a joke, right? So there were two brothers, Jake and Izzy. And these brothers were horrible people. They were thieves, they were crooks, they argued, they were mean to people, they were mean not only to their business associates, but to their family members, and they stole from the poor. Well, Jake died. Izzy goes to the rabbi, the local rabbi, and he says, "Rabbi, I would like you to make a eulogy for Jake at his funeral." The rabbi says, "Can't do it." Izzy says, "Rabbi, I will donate $1 million to the synagogue if you'll make a eulogy at Jake's funeral and say that he was a mensch." The rabbi thinks about this long and hard, and he thinks about what $1 million would mean to the synagogue and to the Hebrew school, and how many of the poor congregants could be fed Friday night dinners, and how many kids could benefit at the Hebrew school. And he says, "All right, I will make the eulogy and say your brother was a mensch." At the funeral the next day, the rabbi steps up and he says about Jake, "Jake was a crook. He cheated in his business. He lied not only in business, but to everyone in town. He was cruel, not only in his business, but to his family members. And he stole from the poor. But compared to his brother Izzy, he was a mensch." And as you see, the rabbi obeyed the law. You can't make up stuff to say at a funeral, but find whatever good qualities you can and relate those. And of course, if you're making a funeral for an average person, he'll have many good things to talk about. And for a great person, what a treat and a privilege to be able to make a eulogy over a great person who lived a righteous life. Okay. We also have on this page 62, before we leave it, still relating to this bathroom talk, Bar Kapara. It says about Bar Kapara, the sage Bar Kapara, that he sold sayings for dinars. Now, dinars are quite valuable, right? A sela is a small coin. A dinar, that's valuable money, right? So the idea that he sold sayings for dinars might have meant that he was incredibly wise and people would pay for his sayings, or it might have meant that Bar Kapara hardly ever spoke. But when he spoke, it was to say something profound. Right? So these 4 sayings that I'm going to share of Bar Kapara, I want you to understand that they might sound simple, but they are profound. And the last of them, you will agree at this time, and what's going on in the world is very wise. The kind of wisdom that you can bank on. So, number 1, says Bar Kapara, if you are hungry, eat. And what he's saying is, you're hungry, food is available, and you might say to yourself, I'll eat later, I don't feel, I'm hungry now, but it'd be better to eat later, or when this prominent person comes and I'll sit with him, or you make up all kinds of stuff. But when you have the opportunity to eat and you are hungry, eat, because God gave you the hunger and God gave you the food, and these 2 things should come together. Number 2, if you are thirsty, drink. Same thing. You are thirsty, the beverage was available, God arranged these 2 things for you at that time, take advantage. Don't talk yourself into some better time to slake your thirst later. Number 3, while the pot is boiling, pour. Now this is a euphemism. This is why it's being brought up now on this page. This means that if you need to go, number 1, and you have an opportunity to go, go! don't hold in number 1. It's unhealthy. That applies to number 2 as well. If you need to go to the bathroom and it's possible for you to go to the bathroom, go. Obviously subject, as we've been talking about, to the needs of modesty. Don't, expose yourself in going to the bathroom. But don't hold it in either. And the 4th saying of the profound Bar Kapara: when the horn is sounded in Rome, son of a fig seller, sell your father's figs. What does this mean? When the horn is sounded in Rome means figs are needed. The market is demanding figs. This is being addressed to son of a fig seller as opposed to the fig seller. This means dad is away. He's the fig farmer, or he's the fig seller. He left you in charge of the stall, and you have to make a decision, right? You haven't been told to sell figs, but you've got, what's the word? You've got possession and authority over a bunch of figs, and right now the market is good for figs. The market is hot for figs. Don't go running off to find your father to get permission to sell the figs. Sell the figs, because the time is now. With the stock market going insane these days, up, down, and who knows what's going to happen next. If you identify a situation where your instinct, your gut says, this is the moment, so seize the moment, right? When your gut tells you this is the moment, when it's clear that the market demands that you act. That's Bar Kapara. And then we return to the Mishnah. The Mishnah that we've been, sort of making Gemaras on, that our sages are commenting on, was sort of a complicated Mishnah in the sense that it had a lot of different teachings in it, not all of them related to each other. And so now we return to the Mishnah for one of the late teachings in that Mishnah, which was, do not enter the Temple Mount carrying your staff and wearing shoes and with your money belt on. Just do this, right? Out of respect for the temple, even when the temple is gone, if you walk on the Temple Mount, and we know that these days that's actually a complicated thing to walk on the Temple Mount. I'm not going to talk about the politics of that. But if you have an opportunity to walk on the Temple Mount, you don't carry your staff, you don't wear shoes, and you don't carry your money, right? You go out of your way to be respectful for the place where God made God's residence at the time that the temple stood, where the divine presence was always present. And from that, we also learn out that we don't use the Temple Mount as a shortcut. Right? We would enter the Temple Mount to visit the Temple Mount, not to use it as a shortcut to get to the other side where we're going. And that actually applies to a synagogue as well. And perhaps anybody this would be a good lesson for anybody, right? A place of holiness is not something that we use as a shortcut, okay? If you enter to pray and then you could leave on the different exit than you came in because it's going to be more convenient to where you're going, that's okay. But we don't cross through a house of worship to use it as a shortcut. And we don't spit on the Temple Mount, right? We don't use the Temple Mount as a shortcut, and we don't spit there as a sign of respect. That actually does not apply to the synagogue for various reasons that we learn out. We don't learn from the fact that you don't take a shortcut that you can't spit. But if you had to spit for a health reason, you certainly would make sure to clean it up, right? To clean it up. That's it. That's what I got for today. What's our takeaway? Respect. Respect for the divine in all things, even when we're alone, even when we're in the most private of times. We're never completely alone, right? You're always in the presence of the Lord, so act modestly and try to extend that modesty and that regard even to the most private moments, and then how much more will we conduct ourselves like dignified people who others can look up to and will have something kind to say about us at our funerals. Let me just check if there are any questions here. Ooh, strike while the iron is hot, says Leona Sue. Very good. And Pamela says, I'm so glad I caught the show live. I only caught the replay for days. My father used to tell the Jake and Izzy joke all the time. I hope I did the joke justice. Thank you, my dear friends, for tuning in to AT Daily. I forgot I had the bell here. I should have rung it at the beginning, but I've been away for a few days. Maybe we'll get back to it. My friends, it's always great to learn with you. Sending big love from the West Coast.